Well, the stock market is crashing, and so are the temperatures behind this cold front moving through the southeast this morning, bringing showers and thunderstorms for your morning commute. I'll have all the details, plus a look at the longer range and derecho and volcanoes too. We'll get into all of it as a new episode of Cold Rain's Weather World starts right now. Good Monday morning to you folks out there in internet land. Jason Pritchard here with you this morning. Hope your work week has started off well and that you had a nice weekend. It is a rainy one to get started up and down the eastern seaboard, and we're going to take a look at the rain that's out there today on the east and up in the Pacific Northwest, as well as the severe threat that exists in the east. One more day of severe weather to go, and then we are in the clear for a while. We'll look at the long range pattern as well. And we'll talk about derechos and even volcanoes today. So got some interesting stuff to share with you around those two items. So sit back and relax and enjoy the fun. Hope you got your coffee with you. I've got my Monday morning Pilot Knob coffee mug, drinking a cup of coffee as we go through the show today. As always, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad that you're here. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Please give us a like if you like the show. Just hit the little thumbs up button. It takes about 2 seconds. It shows the algorithm that, hey, people are interacting with the show. They like the content. It'll push it out to more people. Leave a comment too. I'm happy to pray over anything going on in your life. I want to make sure that we lift you up and build a community here that can support each other through whatever you're going through. So again, thank you for being here. And so let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do, as we always do, is test your weather IQ, because we like to leave you smarter on this show than when you came in. It's the only internet show that claims to do that. I'm not sure if other shows do it or not, but we claim it and we do it. So what we're going to do today is start off with today's trivia question, or weather IQ question rather. And the question is, what is a derecho? Here are the possible answers: a type of tornado, a type of hurricane, a widespread long-lived windstorm, or a temperature inversion. So we're going to get to the answer. If you know it, type it in the comment section. If you don't know it, wait till the end of the show, and I'm going to reveal it to you. And I've got some interesting things to show you about that. So we're going to take a look at all of that here in just a little bit. But that is your IQ question for the day. It has been a wild and active last 7 or 8 days with regards to severe weather. This system that has seemed to never want to end is finally moving toward the east today and is going to push off in the next 24 to 36 hours and be out of our hair finally. But it's brought over 2,500 severe weather reports, over 150 tornadoes, lots of flooding, wind reports, hail the size of softballs. And so it has been a very, very active and destructive week in some areas, from Missouri to Arkansas to Tennessee to Kentucky, southern Illinois, Indiana. You guys have been hit really, really hard with multiple rounds of severe weather, tons of flooding continuing to go on, and water rescues have been the norm in some of these areas, unfortunately. So, but this system is finally moving off. You can see here from the gulf of cold rain all the way up into the northeast. We've got this cold front that's extending up. Rain is falling along that cold front, heavy in spots, some thunderstorms, particularly over the deep south here. We can see that this morning, but all of this is pushing off finally to the east. Another storm system moving into the west, bringing some clouds and rain out there. If we take a look at the radar image, you can see exactly where that rain and snow is on our radar. So we've got this big plume of moisture coming up out of the Gulf, all up and down the eastern seaboard, a wet commute from Pensacola all the way up through Charlotte, Raleigh getting in on the action, the foothills of North Carolina into Virginia, Richmond, Roanoke, Washington, up to New York, and finally getting up here in the northeast. You're seeing some snow mix in with that. If we go up here, look at Albany, Concord, moving in up to Portland, Maine. Over here in the Great Lakes too, we've got a little bit of snow. Green Bay, Wausau. If we look here, we can see Bay City, Traverse City, Oshkosh, all picking up some snow this morning. It's light, so nothing too major out there in terms of accumulation, but still will not be enough to cause some slick spots. So if you're up here in the Great Lakes, the Northeast, up and down the East Coast this morning, slow it down, take it easy. Better to get there safe a little bit late and safely than not get there at all. So drive safely there. If you're traveling out to the northwest this morning, seeing some rain around Salem, Oregon, Seattle, Portland, Spokane, Boise, seeing a little bit of light rain and some snow in the higher elevation. So just these got these little disturbances moving into the west, bringing some unsettled weather out there. So that's what's going on with our radar image. If we take a look here and see the alerts map, look at this big blue area. These dark blue areas are all freeze warnings that are in effect for this morning. It's starting to warm up as we speak, so those will be dropped soon, but they live on for another day. Where you see these freeze warnings in effect for tomorrow morning, temperatures are going to get down into the upper 20s. So if you've got vegetation interests, be aware of that. Kentucky, as we said earlier, some of these areas here, you see these light green areas, but Kentucky especially, into southern Indiana, Illinois, flood warnings in effect. A lot of rivers are over flood stage here, so be careful. You can see river flooding existing where you see these little light green areas all throughout the southeast, and a flood watch up in place in Georgia and Alabama, near Montgomery, Birmingham, over into the Atlanta metro area, and then winter weather advisory up here in the northeast. So less active on this map than we've seen in the last few days, but nonetheless, where it's flooding, it's a very big concern there. So pay attention, be weather aware in those areas as well. This afternoon, we've got a slight risk of excessive rain way down here near Mobile, Alabama, and the western tip of the Florida Panhandle, and then a marginal risk for maybe some flash flooding in urban areas up through the rest of the southeast toward the East Coast into southern Virginia. So keep an eye on that as you go through your afternoon. You probably see some ponding of water on roads and things like that, but nothing, I don't expect that we're going to see major flooding in these areas. The Storm Prediction Center has issued their outlook for day one today, and we see a slight risk now that's extended all the way up into the Carolinas. What's happening is you've got this front that's sitting back here, and it's coming through very, very slowly. It's slowed down a little bit, and that's allowed for the timing to be such that it's going to move through the Piedmont and coastal plain areas later in the afternoon after we've had time to create some additional heating. There's also these little waves of low pressure that are tracking along the front, and so those are creating some localized spin in the atmosphere, and the extra heating with a little bit of spin creates a bit more of a regional risk for a spin up or two, maybe some wind damage and a brief tornado. So we're going to pay attention through the afternoon in these areas. If we take a look at our threat, our probabilities for different hazards: tornado 5%, 2% up here in North Carolina, 5% down through Georgia, southeastern Georgia, and South Carolina. Wind damage, we could see 15% chance of wind, damaging wind gusts 58 miles per hour or greater within 25 miles of a point. And hail, not so much hail threat today. The lapse rates up in the middle parts of the atmosphere where where thunderstorms would grow quick and fast and get way up tall in the atmosphere and produce hail. We're not seeing those strong updrafts because our lapse rates are kind of weak. That's just a decreasing of temperature with height. That rate of decrease, when it's really, really steep, it gets really cold with height, you have steeper lapse rates and you have stronger, more vigorous updrafts. And so that's what's going on there. The lapse rates are kind of weak, so we're not seeing as strong of an updraft potential. But we've got a low-level jet, and some of that thunderstorms can kind of grab that energy and bring it down. That's why we see a little bit of a wind threat. Hope that makes sense. But that's what's going on tomorrow. We've got this little bitty tiny marginal risk down here in Florida. It doesn't look like a big deal, but you could see a little wind down there tomorrow. And so that's kind of what's going on. Looking this afternoon at the severe threat specifically, Cape, fuel for thunderstorms. This is this morning. If we roll this along, you can see a little bit of Cape here. When these greens start to show up, that gives you a little bit more instability. And so moving this ahead through the afternoon, looking at about noon, and then we get on into 1, 2 o'clock, you start to see some of the stronger returns down here in Georgia and South Carolina. Little bit up here in North Carolina, not all that much, sort of meager. So that's why the threat's kind of minimized. There's just not a lot of Cape here. And you see it really doesn't build. And we saw a bunch of these yellow and orange colors build in over the course of the last few days out here in the western part of the southeast. And that's where they had the big, severe weather outbreak and tornado outbreak and things like that. So Not seeing a lot of instability. And by the time we get into 8 p.m. Tonight and on into overnight period, that front's pushing through. Nocturnal cooling takes hold, Cape's gone, severe threat's gone. So that's what's going on. This afternoon is where we're concerned, just here in the Piedmont sections toward the coastal plain. And looking at, let's go back here. I've put this in a little bit too soon. I wanted to show one more thing here. Let's do this. I want to do this right on the fly. We're going to look at the wind profile at 850, 5,000 feet off the deck. And so let's just roll this back. Had this queued up and I must have deleted that tab because I'm having to do it all over again. Look at this. So this afternoon, we get in here to this morning, later this afternoon, look at this, 850 millibars. This is 5,000 feet off the deck. Look, 50, 40, 50, 60 knot winds up here. And so it doesn't take a lot for an updraft to thunderstorm to grab those winds with its downdraft and push that down to the ground. So that's what we're looking at this afternoon. So we're seeing a little bit more in the way of wind energy just off the ground, and that will progress on east as we go into the nighttime hours tonight. We get on out here toward 8 o'clock. We've still got some nice wind up here. So any thunderstorms that develop could make use of that. And then it just pushes off as we get on into the evening. And the severe threat, as I said, will die down. Taking a look at where the model thinks the thunderstorms are going to be. Looking here, let's go back. So Europeans not all that excited about this. We may see a little bit more convection than what it's showing here, but the line moves through this afternoon, early afternoon. It's in central Georgia, western South Carolina, western North Carolina. That pushes off slowly as we get in toward 8 o'clock. Still got plenty of thunderstorm activity back here in Georgia and South Carolina, a little bit in the southwestern, southeastern sections of North Carolina down toward Fayetteville, over toward Wilmington. And then, as you can see, that just sort of pushes off through the evening. Even where you're not seeing this lightning, this is a lightning display. Even where you're not seeing lightning, there's still plenty of widespread rain here. So it's not going to be dry just because you're not under one of those lightning returns. And then generally the wind this afternoon is going to be gusty at times, gusting into the 20s and 30s, just kind of regionally. If we look here through the afternoon, the accumulated wind map shows plenty of areas from essentially eastern Alabama, much of Georgia, all of North Carolina and South Carolina. You're going to see gusts into the 30s, maybe close to 40 at times, especially in thunderstorms. So be prepared for a little bit of wind this afternoon with the rain. And then if we take a look at the total rainfall prediction, an inch to as much as 2 and 3 inches down here where the flood, the slight risk is, it looks like a lot of that rain maybe has ended or will be ending shortly. Then up here in North Carolina into Virginia is where we could see the lion's share of the rain this afternoon, as a little wave of low pressure sort of enhances that a little bit. We could see 1 to 2 inches there. So that is your severe weather and flooding threat for this afternoon. And now we've got a fun little volcano. Do you know? So our do you know topic for the day is, do you know that the do you know segment for the day is actually a This Day in Weather History? That's right. I miscalled it on the previous cut. So it is a This Day in Weather History, actually. And this day in weather history, something interesting happened. There is a volcano that is famous for an eruption in 79 AD. It destroyed the city of Pompeii, and we've all seen pictures of Pompeii with the people, the destruction of the buildings and the people mummified in ash. And that volcano, of course, was Mount Vesuvius. It is not an extinct volcano, it's an active volcano. And as a matter of fact, this day in history, April the 7th, 1906, it erupted and destroyed Naples, Italy. So it is an active volcano, and it still is active from time to time, and it can still be destructive, but it destroyed Naples, bringing widespread destruction and loss of life in April of 1906. So that is that. Fortunately, there are no signs that it's going to erupt and destroy anything anytime soon. If you like volcanoes and are interested in volcanoes and want to track volcanoes, you can go to several websites. One of those is the Smithsonian Institution, and they monitor volcanoes globally. They've got a little map here that shows you what's going on globally, and they've got a little table as well and kind of show you what's happening here. So you can find information out about volcanoes yourself if you do enjoy reading about them and studying them. Okay, so as we go on throughout your work week this week, we're going to take a look at our jet stream pattern and see how that evolves. So looking at the jet stream display, we can see clearly what we've been seeing the last couple of days. We've got this split flow that's showing up. And so you've got one branch of the jet stream up here. This is your northern branch. Look at this big ridge way up here. That's kind of interesting. And then it sort of reconnects out here. And then you've got the southern branch that kind of comes along in here like this. And they've kind of come together here. And so that's what's going on. And so when you have this sort of a pattern, we've got this front that's moving through this big ridge out here. That is indicative of warmer weather out in the west. And as we start to warm up out west, what's going to happen out east? We're going to cool down. That's the theory anyway. So let's see what happens as we roll this on forward. So that front moves off. You can see that moving off by Tuesday evening. That front is well offshore. Got the northern branch that's sort of coming in here, and let's see what happens to it. So we start to see this buckle out in the Pacific. It forces this ridge up here in the west coast, and then what do we get? A trough in the east. That means there's a ridge of high pressure out here. It's going to be warmer, and a trough up here, meaning it's going to be, that's a terrible trough, but that means it's going to be cooler as we get on in toward the middle of the work week. And this cold front is going to be the impetus for ushering in that cooler air. So looking here at, where are we? We're at overnight, Wednesday night, approaching Thursday morning. Look at that. Boom, man. Chilly air. Big trough in the east, big ridge out west. So it's going to be warm out west, chilly in the east. Little low pressure system starts to develop with this trough as we get toward the end of the week, bringing some unsettled weather back to the east coast, but not really a massive severe weather outbreak or anything like that. And we get on in to the end of the 7 to 10 day period. We start to see kind of a messy signal here. We've got the jets coming in to the west coast, and little pieces of energy are moving across. So we're probably going to end up seeing some little storm systems move across. Are we going to see another big severe weather outbreak? Well, TBD on that. Not sure yet, but at least for the next 7 days, things are going to quiet down markedly as we get on out in time. Looking at the surface map, so this is a better depiction of what you'll see at the surface. This morning, cold front up and down. We're seeing plenty of rain associated with that. Showers working into the west, Pacific Northwest. Later this afternoon, we get on into tonight, around 8, 9 o'clock. Everything starts to push off the east coast. Snow winds down up in the northeast as we get into tomorrow morning. Continued activity out here in the northwest. High pressure in control out east, and warming up out west as we get into overnight hours on Wednesday. Wednesday morning, a little bit of activity as this jet kind of comes out of Canada. You're seeing little waves of energy kind of in that jet. You'll see some showers and clouds from time to time along the track of that jet, and maybe some showers as we get on into Thursday and Friday. Starts to develop a storm out here in somewhere across the Ohio Valley, Mid-South into the Southeast. There's a little bit of model discrepancy here. So keep your eye toward the end of the week if you live in the Southeast up to the rest of the Eastern Seaboard. As the European starts to develop that system Friday night into Saturday, moves it on up the coast. A little secondary wave develops off the coast here. The GFS doesn't have that second wave, so it just sort of shoots the first wave up. So a little bit of unsettled weather coming back in toward the weekend. And then we're good to go again. No big severe weather outbreaks as we get toward mid-April. So that's good. Temperatures, I've pulled up some temperature maps for us. Looking at today, this afternoon, 80s confined to potentially the coastal plain areas down in Florida and down here in the desert southwest. Very cold up here across the Great Lakes. You guys may not get above freezing in some areas. Get on into the mid-south, we're at 60s, 70s. And as that cold front pushes through, colder air is going to eventually spill in behind it. Chilly in the northeast, warming up in the Intermountain West. Lows overnight tonight, freezing concerns everywhere where you see the purple, that's below freezing. We're not going to quite make it below freezing in southern Virginia into the Carolinas, but maybe getting close to Tennessee, and everywhere up in the northeast quadrant of the country is going to be below freezing. That's normal for some of you here in the mid-Mississippi River Valley. It's not so normal, and that's why those freeze warnings are up. So watch out for that. And guess what? I am on the wrong display again for this. I'm sorry, I do this every day. That is your low temperature map. So you can take a quick peek at those. As we get into Tuesday, warm up in the Central Plains and the Intermountain West, chilly up in the Rockies, still cold up near the Great Lakes, may not get above freezing again on Tuesday, and then 40s underneath that, 50s big change down here in Raleigh and Charlotte and Columbia, 60s in Columbia. You get on down into Montgomery, 60, around 68, 70, somewhere in there. Jackson, 69. So where we had 80s, close to 90, it's going to feel a lot colder as we get into Tuesday. Tuesday night, here's where the freezing concerns kind of come into the upper southeast. Technically, Raleigh's, we were looking at 34, but some of the outlying areas, that's the airport, some of the outlying areas could definitely get into the 30s, low 30s. So vegetation concerns, be very, very careful in a lot of these areas in the upper southeast particularly, and on into the northeast, back into the Rockies, very cold. 40s and 50s into the lower plains. And then finally, as we get on into Wednesday, temperatures rebound a little bit. We've still got a trough in the east, so it's colder than normal here. A little warmer out in the plains. Again, it's warming up out here, and in the Intermountain West, very, very warm, 60s and 70s, 80s and 90s as we get into the lower plains. So that is your temperature profile as we head on into the week, through the week, as we get toward the weekend. Looking at our 6 to 10 day outlook, 6 to 10 days above normal out here in the plains where you saw those oranges and yellows earlier, a little bit below normal out in the Pacific Northwest, a little bit below normal out on the East Coast when you average it all out together, 6 to 10 days out. Going to be a little more below normal the first part of the period. So, in the 2 to 5 day time frame, it's going to be really chilly out here in the east. And then precipitation wise, below normal for the end of our 10-day period as we get on into mid-April, and then above across the north where kind of the main axis of the jet stream exists. So that is it, folks. That's the show for the day. And we're going to wrap it up here with our trivia question. Today's Weather IQ question is about derechos, if you remember from earlier. And the question was, what is a derecho? Type of tornado, a type of hurricane, a widespread, long-lived windstorm, a temperature inversion. And the correct answer is a widespread, long-lived windstorm. And it isn't just an ordinary windstorm. It's associated with a thunderstorm complex. So what happens is thunderstorms begin to form in a very unstable environment, and soon they organize into a line that bows out. You've seen a bow echo probably. It's just a bowing of a line of thunderstorms, sort of bows out like a bow, okay? And we know that. So what makes a derecho a little bit different than a regular bow echo? Well, these line segments or bow echoes are organized thunderstorms, and they often travel a little ways and then sort of peter out as they go on. But what happens with the derecho is that it becomes self-reinforcing, and it's usually fairly wide. It encompasses a fairly wide area instead of just a small couple of counties, and it travels a very, very long distance. In fact, it's defined as a wind-damaged swath with this line of storms that extends more than 240 miles and includes gusts of at least 58 miles per hour or greater along most of its length. This is interesting. I didn't know this. The origin of the term, okay, so the word derecho is Spanish for straight ahead and was coined in 1888 by Dr. Gustavus Henriks to distinguish thunderstorm-induced straight-line winds from damaging rotary winds of a tornado. So it's just trying to distinguish between straight-line winds and tornado. And so what happens is thunderstorms start as a cluster or a single storm, and then they eventually form this bow echo, and the downdraft from that bow echo forces warm air out ahead of it upwards. And then the cooling, as the warm air rises, it sort of reinvigorates the line itself. Rising air cools and then condenses and forms clouds, and you have this big unstable air mass out ahead of this derecho, this line of storms, and it continues to force that up. Downdrafts cool behind, cold pool develops, it continues to push forward and push more warm air up, and this sort of becomes a self-reinforcing mechanism, and these lines can travel hundreds of miles and do extensive damage. In fact, in 2020, a derecho moved through Iowa and parts of the upper Midwest and had 140 mile per hour winds. So that was incredibly destructive. As a matter of fact, take a look at this. I'll put a link to this in the description. If you haven't seen this, if you're a weather enthusiast, you probably have seen this. But if you have not seen it, let me let me do it this way. I'm going to bring it over to another display so you can see the whole thing. Let me get it over here and put it on screen. And I'll make it full screen and see if we can see this. Okay, this looks pretty good. So check this out. This is a YouTube video of the Cedar Rapids, Iowa derecho in 2020. And if we play it, I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's 30 minutes. You can hear in the background somebody's recording and they've got their weather radio on, which is very smart. But it starts, and if we roll it forward a little bit, look what's going on. Hey, it's a commercial. Let's watch the commercial, get them some revenue, and we'll skip it. All right. Now you get into the video a little bit, and my screen resolution is outpacing the actual video resolution. But look at that. We get on into it a little bit more. Look what's going on. Trees have just completely been annihilated. They recorded the whole thing. This thing lasted for a long time, folks. Very, very interesting, and I wanted to show you that. So I'll put a link to it in the video. Watch it; it's fun. All right. Well, it's not fun for them. I don't mean to minimize the damage, but it's a interesting weather video to watch. So anyway, folks, I hope that's helpful to you. I hope you understand a little bit more about derechos and the weather for the week. And I probably won't do a video tomorrow. It's going to be a quiet week. I'm going to be out of town. So anyway, hope you have a great rest of the week. Now you know the weather. And of course, as always, this is Cold Rain reminding you that if other weather channels run 24/7, we got you covered 48/14. Have a good day, folks. Take care.